sciences or biochemistry or something like that. Yeah.
People are very crazy passionate about like their one diet
Yeah.
or something else. So that's what I'm like, okay.
I wrote a whole post on that, how like nutrition, we talk about nutrition like we talk about politics, and that people dig their heels
So true.
in one way, and that's how it is, and if you don't do it that way, you're wrong, or like, you're a bad person.
You have to do
That's a great analogy.
Otherwise,
politics,
you are a bad person. You are a devil worshiper.
Right. Yeah, that's why I'm like, I don't even want to get involved, and I have my own beliefs, you know, and this is what I'm gonna do. This is how I'm gonna eat. And
I mean, I don't get why we
choose
just
your diet.
can't, you know, let people be. You know?
Yeah.
I know, but everybody is so like, oh, I do keto and it's the best diet, it's the right diet, it's this, you know.
Yeah. Well, it's weird that we don't see that with like training concepts.
Yeah.
Because I feel like it, you know, could kind of be the same way. Like,
it's almost like they all work, so just choose which one's best for you.
Right.
You know?
That's exactly how the like diets are. So
Yeah.
just do
I don't understand why people
I
are so
agree.
much more dogmatic with their nutrition than they are with their training. You know. So it's just kind of weird to me.
Yeah. Well, you guys enjoy that field.
Yeah.
You guys can keep fighting that battle.
So I mean, everybody kind of knows that. Okay, I have to do some strength work. I have to do some hypertrophy work.
Right.
You know, I kind of have to do some self maintenance to keep my joints and tissues healthy.
Right.
So everybody kind of has a basic understanding what they need to do. But when it's nutrition, it's like, okay, you have to eat grapefruit, and that's it.
Yeah. People follow the craziest stuff.
grapefruit and have some protein. And good.
Yeah.
Yeah. The supplements
it's so
now.
trippy because a lot of the people that we follow, they kind of, it's always like this subtle thing where they say, all right, all these diets work, but the underlying kind of structure between why it all works is because there's a calorie deficit.
Exactly.
But people hate it.
That's what I tell people too. I'm like,
people,
well, of course,
people
'cause
hate
you're
it
cutting calories.
when you
That's
strip the diet down to just a calorie deficit. Like, no, this and this and this and this. Like, yes, there is
and
a lot of
everyone
nuance.
you're cutting out a macronutrient,
Yeah.
basically. So you cut your calories.
There's a lot of nuance when it comes to nutrition, and obviously there's individual variabilities. But it's like you're missing the forest for the trees, right?
Yeah.
It's like it's still a calorie deficit at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Okay, but
I know.
we got off
topic
topic already.
We're not here to talk about nutrition. I hope.
Alright.
So
3, 2, 1. Alright, everybody, we are back once again, actually really once again, with the Igor podcast. We're here once again with Rachel Larson.
Hi, Rachel.
hi.
Rachel's back.
Thank you for coming back.
Yes.
Yeah, she was very gracious and let us have her here again because I messed up the audio last time. Or actually, it wasn't me. It was the library's fault. Anyway,
Yes. We always shift blame. It's never our fault. We're perfect people.
I'm a perfect person. So today, like before, we're going to talk about the paper that she published, and hopefully we won't stick too much on that though, because I'm sure there's other things we can definitely talk about. But we'll dive into that first. The mind-muscle connection. Very exciting stuff. I thought this was really exciting.
Yeah.
I did too. So. Obviously.
I hope
Yes.
so. How long did that take to like from start to finish?
Let's see. Probably about a year, a little bit over a year. I mean, the publication part took probably a year in itself as well.
So you were just thinking about gains for a whole year.
Oh no, I've been thinking about it for much longer than a year.
But then how can I give this information to everybody else?
Right.
Yeah.
Which I'm still currently working on. So.
Well, before we start, Rachel, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? You know, how you got into, what you're doing now.
Okay.
Just a short history, like a short Instagram bio.
Ooh,
Excellent.
okay, like an elevator
Yes.
speech, huh?
Yeah, there
okay. Strength and conditioning coach. Primarily right now work with rugby athletes, and then I'm also professor here at ASU in the exercise and wellness department. Teach a lot of resistance training courses for them. I got interested in this because I was an athlete myself. I played volleyball. I'm a lot shorter than most of the other volleyball athletes.
I remember that from the first podcast.
Yes.
We kind of bonded there.
Yeah.
I was very short for a basketball player.
Exactly. So you have to figure out how to improve your performance on your own. So
Yes.
started studying performance, in high school, cutting out every magazine article because, of course, that's all you know to
That's
go
all you
through
had.
at that age. Yeah. And so,
Did you cut out newspaper clippings too and go to the library?
I don't think that there was much in the newspaper about performance, but yeah, I mean, it was all the fitness magazines and things like that. And
Like
what is Gabrielle Reese doing on the beach that I could do, in my backyard or something like that.
Did you ever frequent like the old bodybuilding.com forums? Cause
yeah, just trying to figure out like anything that I could.
Yeah.
And so as soon as I graduated, I'd heard of the exercise science degree and started pursuing that. Went on to get my master's in biomechanics, and now working to complete my PhD.
So I'm curious as to why did you do the master's in biomechanics and not just like general exercise science?
Well, let's see. In undergrad, there was kind of two different tracks that you could take. One was more exercise physiology based. So people were studying, what are the effects of caffeine on, this performance and that performance. Looking at, let's see what else some people were looking at. They started studying more like diabetes, more medical type stuff, and then there was the biomechanics side.
Yes, we have enough of that.
I'm a little more of like a math person, and so I remember taking my first biomechanics course, and I'd already taken physics, and in physics I'm like, okay, cars crashing, blah blah blah. I took biomechanics, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, these two football players are running towards each other.
There's a car crash, the body's ejected. How fast is it ejected?
Yes.
Or how can I get really jacked so that when a car crashes, I'm unharmed?
Right. Yeah.
I stopped the car.
Yes.
Yeah. So I was, as soon as I took that course, I'm like, oh, this is interesting. And so also just, trialing differently, reading a bunch of research on jumping and landing, because again, I was a volleyball player in college as well. And so did some undergrad research on the effects of, our coach wouldn't let us stretch. So I'm like, why can't we stretch? So I'm like, I'm going to study this. And so the effects of stretching I did on landing kinetics and stability.
So I can go look that up?
Just to see. No, it's not a published thing. It was just like a poster presentation.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
And then learned about leg stiffness. So did another study on leg stiffness. And so it was mostly because of my jumping and landing interests. And it was a little more math-based than chemistry-based, which was the physiology side of things. So I kind of decided to pursue that a little bit more. Wanted to be a sports biomechanist for a while, and then I started looking into jobs, and it's like they all started hiring engineers as opposed to biomechanists, and so... and I was going to school in Oregon, so they had Nike up there and everything. So I'm like, ooh, I'll go work at Nike or Adidas or something like that,
Yeah, Nike and Adidas headquarters up there, right?
Now you're at an Adidas school.
Yes, exactly, right? So when I started looking at jobs, and I'm like, wait a second, they're only hiring engineers? Like, what's a biomechanics degree? What can I do with this? And I'm like, oh, guess I'll go back to school, and keep working with athletes and do my thing.
So I mean, from what I gather, a lot of stuff that you were doing related to performance, but then your paper is attentional focus strategies focusing on resistance training and hypertrophy. That's kind of like a shift from performance to just like muscle building. Any reason why there was like a shift in your area of study?
Well, it was mainly because I started training athletes more in the weight room right after I got my master's degree, and then especially when I started working with rugby athletes. They have 2 seasons, they have 15s and 7s, so you have limited time. So it's like, how can I maximize the time that I have with them in the weight room, and what are the best ways to get results with them, in that setting? And so that's when I started studying resistance training a lot more. Obviously, I'd studied it all throughout school and everything, but that's when I really looked at, okay, how can I get an edge with these athletes when I'm training them? And again, that was back in, I think, 2009. I started doing that more.
So what does that term mean, attentional focus, and how does that relate in the training concept?
Okay, attentional focus is primarily been talked about kind of in the field of motor learning. So it's what you're actually thinking about or focusing on when you're performing any type of physical task. And so we've looked at 2 primary types of attentional focus and how they affect performance, and now we're looking at how they're affecting resistance training and muscular adaptations. But with an internal focus, generally you're thinking about what your body's doing, your body movements, that's that mind-muscle connection. And then the external focus is when you're thinking about the end result of the task that you're performing, like getting the weight up, right, when you're lifting it. And so primarily through the past 20 years of attentional focus research, it's been said that an external focus, right, is going to enhance any type of motor skill performance more than when we think about what the body's doing. and we're actually interfering with, you know, our body's automatic processes and all these different things going on, even physiologically, which I'm sure we're going to get into. And so, but there was one thing that was noticed with an internal focus, and that was enhanced muscle activation. And so thought, okay, there's a place for this. You know, where can we find that there's some benefit with muscle activation? Oh, well, hypertrophy, right? There is an association there, not a causation,
yes.
You know, an association. So that's what kind of started to drive that line of thought to test it out in more resistance training studies. So.
Gotcha. This question totally blanked out on what my question was going to be.
Don't you know when that happens? That's all right. We have the ability to cut film.
I know. Okay, and so then what were the steps to kind of design this study then? Once you decided, okay, this is something I want to take a look at. What protocols, like what were some of the methods and things that you put together to design the study?
Well, first looking at what's been done in the field of resistance training already, there's very limited research. There was a study back in 2004 by Vance, and he's the one that first really looked at the neuromuscular level, what was happening, discovering that we have an enhanced, you know, muscle activation. There's been some other studies, can you actually cause enhanced muscle activation by thinking about that? Somebody did lat pull downs. We're seeing, you know, enhanced force production with lifting, all those types of things. And so really just studying the overall literature that's out there, looking at the research designs that have been done. And then Brad really put this study together. And, you know, it took place at his college in New York as well. And so basically just, what are we going to do? We're going to do something a little bit more controlled. Okay, we're going to do bicep curl, and again, knee extensions. Some of the thought behind that was we had chosen untrained individuals to perform this study, and thought that maybe they're going to have more control over their actual internal focus when we limit the task. So making it more of a single joint task versus multi-joint. We know untrained individuals get all those neurological developments and things when they begin training. So we figured that would be more of the result if we chose, you know, a multi-joint task like, you know, a squat or a bench press or something like that. So hoping to make it more hypertrophy specific, we chose to go with the single joint movement.
And then so how did you kind of instill them to do, because you broke it down from an external and an internal focus, right?
Correct.
And so then how did you have them separate those two?
Well, they're in different groups,
right.
And the individual that would be facilitating their training session would, with each repetition, give them a focus to, you know, flex the bicep or get the weight up. So the internal focus group was flex the bicep, the external focus group was told to get the weight up. With the leg extensions, it was to flex the quad or to get the weight up. So again, they were switched up, and again, with every single repetition, they were cued with either the internal or external focus. So they did about 8 to 12 repetitions till failure, 4 sets, and then 2-minute rest periods.
And then I'm kind of curious about this myself. So you to measure changes, you guys used, was it ultrasound?
Ultrasound, yeah.
Okay. And I know in other training studies, I've seen different modalities in what they use. What's kind of the difference in which one, if there is kind of like a better one, in those cases? Well,
I mean, you can get more expensive, fancy equipment, DEXA scanning and things like that, you know, but ultrasound is shown to be, you know, validated instrument to utilize.
So I'm assuming that one of the metrics that you took during the study was related to hypertrophy.
Yeah, we were looking at muscle thickness.
And you used ultrasound for that. Is there any, so ultrasound versus EMG, did you guys use EMG at all?
Yes, we did.
Okay. And did you use EMG for hypertrophy, or did you use that for more of like the activation of the muscle? Because I know that you also observed strength adaptations, right?
In this study, we didn't use EMG. Sorry.
Okay.
In this other one that I'm working on, I'm using EMG.
Okay.
Yeah. But EMG would be, EMG would be utilized to just measure muscle activity.
Okay.
So. We just measured muscle thickness. And then we also did muscular strength isometrically. And so, but our main focus was to look at muscle thickness.
Okay.
And so we did see, a 12% increase in muscle thickness in the elbow flexors versus the quadricep. So that was kind of the main finding of our study, and that was a significant result with large effect or moderate effect.
It was almost double, right? Like the internal.
This was about 6%.
Almost double.
The internal focus was 12% roughly, and then the external was about 6%. So, and that was just in the bicep.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So in the quadricep, they were similar. Okay.
So let's put it in the context of athletes.
Mm-hmm.
When would you use like external cueing versus like get the load up, or hey, I want you to do 15 reps in this set, versus the internal cueing where, all right, I want you to actively think about contracting this specific muscle?
If I want force production or motor skill performance to be the end result, I would have them use some type of an external focus. Whereas if hypertrophy is the goal, that's the only time right now I could say to use an internal focus.
Okay.
So maybe if I'm doing this long periodized training session with them, then I would have them use an internal focus during maybe the hypertrophy phase, and then switch to external as we get more to a power phase.
Okay.
So.
Gotcha.
That makes sense.
It does.
Yeah, definitely. I keep blanking out on my stupid questions. Jesus. I have them, and then they just like go away as soon as I'm ready to ask it.
We start babbling about other things.
Yeah.
Sidetrack.
Okay, so while you're thinking about your question, I'm gonna elaborate a little bit more.
Okay.
On the study, it said that you observed with the internal cues, you observed an increase in agonist antagonist stimulation with the internal cueing. Can you explain what that means and what the significance of that is?
Yes, because that is one of the reasons why the constrained action hypothesis came about, that Dr. Gabrielle Wolf developed.
Can you talk about that real quick before we go deeper?
Yeah, and it's whenever you think about internally what your body's doing, you actually constrain your fine motor movements, and it results in less than optimal performance. Okay. And so some of the mechanisms behind that that Vance demonstrated in his research was that when you think about flexing the bicep, yes, we have that mind-muscle connection, and you see enhanced activation in the bicep muscle, but we also see it in the tricep muscle. And so if you're seeing it, generally reciprocal inhibition is supposed to happen, right? So we flex the bicep, the tricep's supposed to relax so that it can elongate. Well, if we're seeing, this co-contraction kind of going on, or heightened activity, it can actually limit the degrees of freedom within a joint. So it can constrain kind of those fine motor movements that we have because we have more muscle activity going all over. Whereas your body would be able to just normally say, hey, I need this one to contract, this one to relax, and we don't think about it. Okay, so you have that subconscious control, and you're interfering with that basically when you start to.
So I guess that makes a lot of sense, where you would use an external cue for more skill-based activities, because you're not you don't have to think about it. Your body just if it's a learned motor pattern, you just get up and go.
You interfere with it if you start to think about it.
If you think about it too much.
In states of anxiety in sport, let's say you're at the free throw line and people start to get nervous, right? Athletes in those states. And so they actually start to, it's shown by research, internalize. So they start to think about, is my elbow up high enough? Oh, what's my hand looking?
Oh, okay.
And so that's where they choke in sport.
That's why. So I guess that's why a very
so choking is overthinking.
Yeah, basically.
For coaches to do is like, all right, don't overthink it too much. Just do it how you've always done it, and you should be okay.
Yep. Okay. And that's why we're supposed to coach in analogies and other things.
Yes,
they're not
metaphors and
thinking
philosophies.
about you can over cue someone, and they're like, wait, where do my hands go? What do I do? How do I bend my elbows? Are they high, low? What's going on?
Well, I think that's an important thing for anyone who's coaching relatively new lifters is not to overload them with cues for something like a squat or a bench press, or just a big heavy compound lift, or even just like a bicep curl. Like there's a bunch of cues you can throw into it that may be appropriate for someone who's a little bit more trained, who wants to tweak those little bits of form.
Right.
But it's not necessarily appropriate for a beginner lifter. You just want them to get used to the movement.
That actually makes me feel really good about the way that I coach athletes, because I mean, people don't realize it, but even something like, so I coach powerlifting, even the squat, the bench, and the deadlift, they're still fine motor patterns. If you overload the athlete with too many cues at the same time, and they really don't get anywhere because they have to think about all these things all at once.
Right.
So when I coach, and I tell my athletes this all the time, the reason why we're taking things slow is because I want you to learn one thing first, and then we move on to the next.
Right.
Because once you learn and you internalize that one thing, you don't have to think about it, it just happens naturally.
Yep, and it will actually limit their force production if you give an internal cue during that moment. So if they're lifting for power, maybe you want to give them external cues.
Yes.
Is it appropriate though, when they're just learning the movement, the weight isn't necessarily important? Would it be useful to give internal cues in that case?
When they're learning the mechanics of the lift,
yes,
possibly. So they're a new lifter. There has been some controversies about this very specific topic. Some people are like, "Oh, never use an internal cue," right? And then, but there has been some research done, and it's if you have a beginner, you want to limit the amount of internal cues because you don't want that to become their main focus as they become a trained lifter. And so, but sometimes you might have to give an internal cue. However, if you could try to, again, use an analogy like sitting in a chair with squatting or something like that, it's better than giving an internal cue. So you have to be kind of creative with your cues.
Is like tactile, like for example, if I wanted somebody, or like let's say I had somebody who didn't know how to flex their lats, and they're doing a lat pull down, and I put my hands on their lats, and I tell them, okay, here's how it's supposed to feel like when your lats contract. This tactile information like that, does that count as an external cue?
It's going to be an internal cue.
Oh, okay.
Because guess what? Then they start focusing on that part of their body.
Okay.
Which in personal training, you see a lot of internal cues given, right?
Yeah.
And you see a lot, one of the main ones I see when people are doing a seated row, squeeze your shoulder blades, and I'll see trainers put that there. And I'm here thinking, are you training for hypertrophy? Because if you're training for strength, maybe you're giving the wrong cue. I don't know, which, again, I'll research that shortly, but we'll see. Resistance training and attentional focus is just kind of a newer studied field. Again, attentional focus is pretty much proven external to be dominant with motor skill performance. But in resistance training, there's a lot of things going on. So which one's better than which? There's, this was the first long-term resistance training study that's been done on attentional focus. And so hopefully some more will continue to come out and we can, kind of have some definitive conclusions around that. Right now I can say focus internally for hypertrophy. Anything else, I would say,
so
in theory, focus externally.
Internal for hypertrophy, but that's it.
Right. So the one I'm working on right now is strength, right? And to see if external is better for strength. If you can produce greater forces, maybe you can lift heavier weights. Maybe over time you're, gonna get stronger.
So we'll jump back to that. But I want to go real quickly to kind of wrap up the previous study that you did. So you said that there was a improvement in using internal cues for the bicep and not for the legs.
Correct.
Do you think that's found like in a physiological basis, or do you think something like a result of new trainees not being able to recruit all like the different muscles in the legs and everything? Like, would there be a difference in trained people, you think?
I would say that obviously we need more research on that, but I would think there might be a different result with trained individuals because trained individuals maybe that have already been training for hypertrophy may be able to utilize that mind-muscle connection a little bit better. And they're in filling specific muscles, whereas an untrained individual, obviously everybody can flex their bicep, right? You've been doing it since you were a kid. But thinking about actually contracting the quadricep for an untrained person might be a little bit more difficult to gain that mind-muscle connection. So I think that's why we didn't really see a significant difference in the quadricep, but we did see, big significant difference in the bicep.
And I also read in the paper that you mentioned that the upper body, we're just naturally a lot more, we do a lot more fine motor skills with our hands than we do with our feet. So it's a lot easier for us to kind of feel up here than it is for us to feel down here.
Yep, absolutely. So that was mentioned because, again, just like you can actually focus and have that connection a lot better up here.
So is that like, let's say, if you did another a study
Mm-hmm.
expanding on this, would you like choose maybe like trained populations,
Mm-hmm.
and then maybe people who are a little bit more, let's say, as opposed to novice or beginner, maybe intermediate or advanced athletes that know kind of, all right, here's how it's supposed to feel like when I'm flexing my quadriceps?
Yeah, probably start with that. So replicating this research, but with a trained population. One of the limitations to that would be that maybe the trained individuals already have a focus that they've, been using in training for so long. So it's hard for me to know if you're truly focusing externally when I tell you to,
right.
or if you've already kind of developed that
okay,
habit.
so if it's kind of like
So if they're actually
habit's
doing
already
what you're
built in.
cueing them to do.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So that could limit the results, but again, we'll study it and see what happens, and then probably move to more complex tasks. So do more multi-joint movements and see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it'd be kind of hard to pick out of somebody. Like, all right, if I already have an internal cue of how I do things, how do you know that
Right.
this person is responding to the external cue that I'm giving them, or are they just doing the same thing that they've done
Exactly.
forever?
Right.
You just record your voice saying it, and then while they're sleeping, they
Yeah.
Oh, I also saw that
Possible.
one of you guys measured dietary adherence. So why was that something that you needed to measure?
Just, since we were looking at hypertrophy, somebody's not eating, right? Obviously.
So I'm thinking it was like, all right, maybe if you ate too much protein, maybe that can confound the results.
Yeah, we wanted to
somewhat.
make sure, but there wasn't really good adherence to the dietary journals,
But then, like,
so
they
we
just
couldn't.
ate
That happens a
whatever.
lot in
They just ate
research,
whatever.
doesn't it?
Yeah, with the dietary stuff. So makes it a little bit difficult, but I mean, nonetheless, we still found what we found.
Yeah.
So, but again, it's better if we can replicate research to know if we can really trust these results. So.
Guys, if you're in a study, adhere to the diet and the protocol that they tell you to. It's going to make everyone's lives and gains much easier to obtain.
Yes.
Please do.
Yes, please do. Please
What
don't
else?
drop out at week 6.
Okay, so there's that.
There was a lot of retention in your study. You had to start off with 30, and you had 27 completed.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not bad, right? You only had 10% drop it.
Correct.
So, because sometimes I'll read the studies like, all right, we started out with like 100 people, then you drop to 50 people.
Well, it's hard, especially
everybody got injured or something happened.
And I'm using, some trained individuals right now in some research that I'm doing, and it's, you're only allowed to bench press for 6 weeks upper body, so
geez.
sorry, no
That'll make me
curls
nuts.
for the girls over the
no.
summer,
Atrophy.
Yep. They can do anything lower body, but sorry, just bench press upper body.
Yeah.
So it's hard if people have been training to tell them, sorry, you can't do that.
Yeah. Real quick before we go to your strength study that you're doing, what are some things that you'd want to tell, like, research participants? Some things that are either just like your pet peeves or something that you wish they would know.
Oh, my pet peeves. So don't miss your sessions, right? Because makeup sessions, right, might skew the results a little bit, obviously you can work around it a little bit.
I read that people made your session about 90% of the time.
Yeah.
So you kind of lucked out there.
Lucky, yeah. It's hard in strength and conditioning research to even have a big group of individuals, and again to get them to adhere to training studies. So
and some of these were students, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. College-aged individuals. So all in New York.
All in New York. Go to your sessions.
Yes,
if you live in
please.
New York.
Show up to your sessions.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're doing another study.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit? It's got a different focus this time.
Yeah, I can talk
No
about
pun
it a
intended.
little bit, right? I can't really say everything going on, but the theory behind it is that through, again, all this attentional focus research and enhancements in, force production, let's look at this over time and try and extrapolate it. If you can create a greater force, can you, again, lift a heavier weight? So can you get stronger over time? Or, since it's also been used in motor learning, right, and you actually learn a skill faster and retain a skill more by having an external focus. Well, part of strength is actually learning the skill, and your body learning to co-coordinate contractions of muscles, motor unit firing and all of that. And so we've seen a little bit of indications of that being heightened by an external focus. And so, again, I just want to see, what's happening acutely with strength, right? Can you lift a heavier weight in one session? And then if you're lifting you know, over time with that external focus, are you gaining, you know, more of the skill of strength? Are you getting stronger? So I'm going to do both acute and long-term effects is basically what I'm looking at, just with bench press. So I am using a multi-joint lift because, again, if it enhances the skill, I feel like if there's more movement involved, then there's more of an opportunity for that internal versus external focus to take effect when it has to do with force production, based on the research that we've seen. And so I think somebody will get stronger with an external focus versus an internal. And I think acutely, I mean, it's going to be difficult for them to have an internal focus when they're lifting a heavier weight. We'll also look at, just to make sure that we're having an effect, look at EMG under, I think it's 65, 75, and 85%. No studies have looked at EMG over 80%, you know, reported that. And so I want to see, what's actually going on at 85%. Snyder did do a study and showed, you know, back, I think about at 80%, then it started to decrease its effect. But if you're lifting for strength, you're going to be lifting above 80%. And so, you know, if I want to study strength, I have to see what's going on.
Right. You know what would be interesting to find out? Like, okay, let's say you separate like one part of their training where you're using an internal cue, like let's say with the bench press, right?
Right.
So let's say you have them do a chest isolation work, and you use internal cues there, and then you find, okay, I'm getting a lot more activation out of the chest. I'm getting a better hypertrophy response on the chest. But then on the bench press, you don't use the internal cues, but you see if that's like, all right, did that stuff that I did with the isolation carry over to my bench press? Like pre and post, like without the internal cueing, let's see if I get the same type of activation on the bench press as opposed to like pre and post.
What do you mean?
Like, so for example,
but you're not giving them a cue when they're bench pressing.
Yes, you're not giving them like an internal cue when they're bench pressing.
So do you think they're going to think internal though, since you just trained them internal?
Oh, okay, that may be
possibly.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to know what they're thinking about, right? Because that's what's affecting it.
Yeah. Just ask them mid-set.
Yeah, I mean,
what are you thinking about?
David Markin did a post-task questionnaire with his lat pull-down study to see if participants were actually focusing on what the intended focus was.
Okay.
But again, you know, they might just say, yes, I was thinking about what you told me.
But was I really, or am I just
am I trained this way to think
okay.
internally, you know?
Yeah, okay, that is kind of difficult to separate it when you put it that way.
Yeah.
So with this study,
what are the challenges?
The primary measure is strength, right? That's what you're measuring out of this? Are you also measuring hypertrophy?
No.
No.
This one, not looking at hypertrophy.
Okay, gotcha.
So.
I would be curious to know because, and between both groups, I imagine the volume is going to be equated. Okay, because they're doing the same protocol, correct? Okay. And so what I'm curious to know is, because we've kind of been told in previous research that, you know, so long as the volume is equated, you can do either hypertrophy or strength-specific work, and like the actual results in terms of hypertrophy at least should be the same. Obviously, you'll get more strength adaptations if you train at higher intensities and everything. But with the people, I'd be curious to know if the people doing the internal cue, even though they're doing the same volume, if they'd still have, like, even if it's slightly higher rates of hypertrophy, since they're doing that.
Oh, so equate the volume, but give one internal cues and give like you have a control where you're not giving them any cues at all.
Yeah, I also have a control group.
Okay.
So I have a control and internal and external group.
Yeah.
So it's just we don't have the research equipment of ultrasound here yet. They're trying to order some this summer.
So the study's taking place here?
Yes.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so I got to work with what we got. But
and
there's 3 parts to this study already, right? Like the acute strength and the EMG portion, and then the training study as well. And so maybe after I graduate and finish this study, and then there will be, again, obviously some follow-up studies with this stuff, because there's so many things that can take place, and it's really kind of uncharted, this whole resistance training and, you know,
it's
attentional
literally
focus.
just dipping your
and you will be the pathfinder of mind and muscle connection.
Well, I mean, obviously I find it fascinating, so, you know, been studying this specific topic for about 6 years now. Went into my PhD program wanting to specifically study this, so.
Are there other areas? Yeah, are there other areas of research, or just even future research that you'd want to either see or conduct yourself?
With attention focus or a
With
different area?
Anything.
Yeah, I mean, some other,
I
you
guess
know,
just
big...
like, what are you looking forward to?
Yeah, I mean, strength and power are really my two favorite things to research on. And so, again, probably from being a volleyball athlete. But force velocity profiling is something that is kind of newer in the field. And
you're starting
really,
to see it with apps and stuff too, right?
Right.
You can,
so in
Wes
classes and with some rugby guys, I use the My Jump app.
Okay.
And so the My Jump app, you can actually, you know, we use the squat jump test, and I can determine, you know, what your power output looks like, and get your force velocity profile. So again, force and velocity makes up power, and so I can determine whether you have a deficit on the force side or the velocity side. And so,
so you kind of restructure your training to focus on the areas that you're lacking. That's pretty
right.
cool.
Yes, and I know Buddy Morris used it with the Cardinals this past season. He said he got through everybody's testing in about 45 minutes, so I'm sure he had a bunch of help with that, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't know if he used the Jump or the My Sprint app is another one. The My Sprint app doesn't give you an optimal profile. The My Jump gives you, okay, if you train, you know, your force, then optimally we can improve your power, because they have that optimal profile. So I prefer to use the My Jump one because it already has the information. But it's been validated to use in research, you know, instead of having to buy a force plate and you know, look at force velocity profiling there. Instead, you buy a $10 app and can study that. But you know, just from testing students and athletes, and I've noticed a couple things. You know, when you load somebody up, sometimes you can see where their weaknesses are in their lifts. So I might have done, you know, functional movement screen on you, but there's no weight. So you might look perfect there, but as soon as I put weight on you, all of a sudden it's like, oh, what's with that valgus stress at the knee, you know? And it's something that I've been able to see by doing this force velocity profiling, because again, you're videoing and slowing things down, and it's like, oh wow, I didn't even realize the athlete had that deficit. So now I'm thinking, wait, are they showing a force deficit because of their technique, or are they showing a force deficit because they're actually weak?
Yes.
You know?
That makes a lot of sense. I forgot who talked about it. It was either Louis Simmons or maybe Dave Tate. He was talking about how his athletes would always ask him, what can I improve on in terms of technique, and maybe what I can do in the weight room to improve my lifts. And he said, I can't really tell where you need improvement on until we put weight in the bar.
Absolutely.
Because that's the biggest
I would agree
tell.
with that.
Yeah, that's the biggest tell right there. Once we put weight in the bar, once you get above 85%, then I can see the areas where you're lacking.
Yeah, I see a little dip. Oh, your core is giving out, you know, or what's going on. So I would agree with that.
That makes a lot of sense. All right.
At this point, with all the practical experience and everything that you've had, can you just kind of identify when, or like what the issue is when you see it?
Yeah, and a lot of that is from, you know, the biomechanics background. And again, I mean, I'm staring at people, not like a weirdo or anything, but I'm staring at people walking around like, oh, that's wrong, you know?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden my brain just starts going, oh, how could I fix that? What would I do? You know? It's, you know, which...
No, it's totally not weird.
Yeah. I look in the weight room all the time and I'm like, oh, that's going to be an ACL injury down the road, you know?
It's hard
You
to
must
explain
be
that to
losing
people.
your mind.
Yeah, no, I try not, I'm like, I zone out, you know, and, you know, I switch to a gym, or, you know, I was training here just in our lab because it's like nobody's in there and I could just like focus on myself. Otherwise, at the gym, it's like you can't. I mean, when you're waiting, you know, I was generally trained for strength mainly, but you have those rest periods, so it's just look around, you know. And that's what I'm teaching as well. So you know, I get a lot of good examples to give in class by you know observing other people.
It's hard to be like, okay, it's all right. I'm a professor. I'm staring at you because I'm looking at your biomechanics.
Well, literally, honestly, a couple weeks ago, I did ask this lady if I could take a picture of her gait because as she was walking, right, her knees like bending backwards. I'm like, I'm sorry, like you know, I'm really fascinated with you know what's going on here. I told her that I you know teach a class and you know I didn't put her face in it or anything, but just her legs, you know. And I'm like, because I see her walking, I'm like, your knee's going backwards. What's happening?
Going backwards?
Yeah, it was literally bending like you know super hyperextended.
Why would that happen?
So. I don't know. She was older. She had she had an injury before with her knee, and she said it just started happening, and so she was going to therapy for it.
I've seen that in people's elbows where it's like, all right.
You see that,
Like especially weightlifters, I feel like I see that a lot with overhead overhead movements, it's weird for me to picture that with somebody's knee. I feel like
Oh.
just because you're carrying
You know
the
what I
whole
have
weight
on
of
my
your
phone?
body.
I'll show you
Yeah.
after we're done here.
Yeah, that's crazy.
If I can find it, yeah. So.
You know, that's probably got to be a biomechanics person's like nightmare is weightlifters. No?
No, because then you think about, because then when I'm lifting, I'm like, oh, what's the optimal angle, and to really target this muscle. Okay, how does the muscle move, and in which way should I be moving
Do
to
you see numbers in
optimally
your
get
head?
the contraction?
Like when you picture somebody, all right, here's how their arm is supposed to extend. You see like numbers and angles and.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking about forces and things like that. As I'm showing like rear delt flies in class, and I hate when people are like just bend over just like this, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm doing rear delts," and I'm like,
Oh yeah, and they
"Are
got that
you?
shrug in the
Are
back.
you? Yeah."
What are some things
So-
that you see in the gym that just like make you crazy to that point?
Let's see. Probably behind the head, pull downs, squats where their knees, like they're up on their toes and their knees are
Oh
just
my god.
shooting forward. Usually they're using the Smith machine or something like that, I hate when people are standing there like doing
Oh, I see
this.
that a
and-
lot. It's like, hey, my rotator
yeah.
cuff.
But are you? Right? Doesn't the resistance need to come from the
Yeah.
opposing way? Yeah, opposing direction. Because then, like, well, if you're holding the weight up, right, what's working right now?
Bicep.
Right? Because where's this weight going to go if I let go? It's going to go to the ground. So
Yes.
what's holding it up? Oh, your bicep,
Yeah.
right? So are you really, I'm sure there's, you're rotating. So
Yes.
there's somewhere, but this is not a targeted rotator cuff exercise. That's
What's the issue with the behind the neck pull down?
Well, okay, so
I haven't
when was
heard
it?
that.
About 2004, an article came out about it causing, impingement in the shoulder in addition
makes
to,
sense.
flexing as your head is in this position. So if you're training and you're tightening all your muscles, right, when your head's in this position, then basically you're training your neck to be in this position.
So you're gonna get stuck there.
Yeah, and I mean that was a
You're training to be
common
a
way
chicken.
to train, and
Yeah.
I'd ask you, okay, why? It was when I was first personal training. Why are you doing it that way? And it's like, oh, because I'm targeting my traps and upper back muscles, and I'm like, you're pulling down. Wait,
Like
how's
you can
that?
probably accomplish the same. You can probably target the same muscles with a different exercise and not put yourself through that precarious position.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
push, right?
Yeah.
Why don't we do
Yeah.
some overhead pressing?
Yeah.
So,
With a Quasimodo after those.
yeah. So think about what position you're in when you're, tightening and contracting your
Yeah.
muscles.
Is it the
Yeah.
same with? I know a lot of people like to do the behind the neck presses too. Kind of the same thing.
No, not
Those
the same
are-
thing, right? Because
No,
you
no, I
don't
mean
see
like
people,
yeah, okay, all right.
doing that and pulling
So
down,
those are
contracting,
safe,
right?
yeah,
They're
are those
here,
okay?
and then where does the head go as they
Yeah.
press up, right?
Yeah.
The head's back. It's not like you're contracting with it like this. So.
Going back, changing gears a little bit. Going back to your background as volleyball, how from what you've learned and studied and everything, how do we get people to jump higher?
Well,
What are some
nowadays, after all the research, I'd say you'd have to check their force velocity profile,
Okay.
right? Because historically, what would I do? Oh, I'm going to go run bleachers. I'm going to do a ton of plyometrics. Every time I'd walk by this hallway in my house, I was making myself jump up and touch it like 100 times before I'd allow myself to go into the next room. Like, just crazy stuff. Oh, I just got to jump all the time, right?
Yeah.
And, of course, did resistance training. I think it was 3 days a week at that time. And then it was all sprints and plyos on, Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Mm-hmm.
But now that I know about force velocity profiling, I feel like that's going to change the, and it has changed somewhat the total way that I train. Because I'm going to go look at each individual athlete and specific to what their needs are, as opposed to, and not that we weren't doing that before,
Right.
but now it's almost like, oh my goodness, I'm questioning everything now. Okay, so there was this plyometric study done, and this group improved because they were doing this, training protocol versus this one, and it's like, well, maybe those people in that group needed to improve their velocity, as opposed to, more people in this group needed to improve their strength.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I might be being a little bit crazy about it, but
Yeah.
see
No,
what I'm
but
saying?
if you have that tool and you can kind of tell where they're lacking, then you know exactly where to funnel your efforts in when you're in the weight room.
Yeah.
And do you need to just jump more? Because that left an impression on me. One of my, I think it was Dr. Campbell. She threw out, it was like a joking question in class, like, what do you do to improve somebody's jumping? And she's like, do you tell them to squat more? And I was like, no, you tell them to jump more. And she was like, yes, that's correct. But now you're telling me, all right, you have
Maybe
this
not.
tool. Yeah, exactly. Maybe that's not the case. Maybe they need to squat more.
Right.
Maybe it's the strength curve that needs to be increased, and not the velocity.
Right. Now it makes you question every power study, right?
Yeah.
Do we need to screen our participants for power studies now and make sure that they actually need strength, or these velocity-based movements? I don't know.
So if in order to get them to jump higher, they can't talk. They did need to squat. Would you have them squat at a higher or a lower intensity? Or
Higher.
Higher?
Yep.
Okay.
So yeah, they'd be lifting about 85% and up.
Gotcha.
Yeah, because you always hear that when you're concerned about power production, it's usually in the lower intensities.
Right. But there's a whole curve
Yes,
here.
but the curve is affected by the strength.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So we need lightweight and move really fast, or
Yes.
faster, or do we need heavyweight? I don't know, but now I can test your profile and see what your needs are,
Okay.
right? But yeah, I mean, force velocity profiling, again, that's going to be one of the bigger things now. And I talked to a gentleman up in Canada, and he's using it with soccer athletes, and he's like, well, what are you finding with rugby athletes to be the main weakness? And I'm like, well, it's interesting because most of the time I find a force deficit, which with rugby, I mean, yeah, I would think it would be a velocity deficit, and he trains soccer players, and he's like, well, that's interesting because I always find a velocity deficit with soccer players. And I'm like, really? Because I thought, soccer, I used to train soccer too, and they didn't seem to be typically strong in the weight room, but they did a lot of sprints, a lot of running. So I'm thinking, I think that their velocity side would be, better, and they'd have the force deficit, and I would think the rugby athletes would have the velocity deficit, but it's the opposite. So that's something that I would want to look into later.
Rugby players are usually, I mean, I don't know,
these
maybe
big, strong guys.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yes.
Maybe it's just skewed from what I've seen in the media, but it seems like those guys.
Oh no, it's not skewed.
The court, it's like, yeah, they're really strong in the weight room, so it's their velocity curve that's lacking as opposed to their strength. So you talked about the increasing the strength curve, kind of increasing the force velocity curve as a whole. Do you think it has any benefits for somebody who's just training strength, like to increase their velocity output?
Yeah, I think for strength, you should train all across the curve to improve your strength. Yeah, and periodize it. Don't just always train the same way. But for power, maybe you need to switch up and go this way for a little bit so you improve your power, and then go back to training all along the curve.
Okay. So let's say for me, I'm a powerlifter. Should I train like box jumps or?
Depends on what your weaknesses are.
Okay.
Right? That's what the whole analysis is that we do now. So, do a needs analysis, figure out what you are actually weak on, and train that.
Does anybody provide that service like today? Like if I wanted to come in, all right, I know based on the information that you're telling me that I could benefit, like my strength can benefit from power training.
Right.
But can I go anywhere and say, "Look, can you do a needs analysis on me and figure out exactly what I need to do, or at least give me some guidelines?"
Find a good strength coach, right, that trains independently. Or maybe next semester you can come in and be our guinea pig in
I could totally
our
do that.
460
I'll
class.
still be here.
Yeah.
Yes. That'd be exciting.
Yeah, because we do the whole force velocity day, and I show them how to use the apps and everything in the advanced class. So maybe you can come in and we'll test you out and give you that information.
Imagine if you put up that business, you'd be like the first person to do that. You make so much money.
Test your force velocity. Right? Cost me $10 for the app, right?
Yeah.
A little bit of time. Yeah.
And then you see such marked improvement as athletes. All right, let's go train with her.
Yeah. See, want to get them stronger faster.
Yeah.
So can anyone who, let's say like they don't, like they're a coach in whatever respect that they're doing, but they don't have the heavy exercise science physiology background, could they still benefit from using that force velocity app?
Yes, because if they know how to, the app pretty much guides you through how to do the test pretty well. And so as long as they perform the test correctly, it doesn't take any type of knowledge or anything, obviously, other than how to use an app.
Right.
But one of the nice things that's built into that app is once you get the profile, there's actually a suggested program for the athlete to follow. So if you have a force deficit, there will actually be, you can click on the little information button and it'll say, hey, this is the training that you should do, over the next 8 weeks. And Jimenez Reyes is the one that did the research behind that and has it built into the app. And so, and again, if you have velocity deficit, it'll give you a suggested workout as well.
And so they're actually good recommendations.
Yes, that have been tested and researched to improve the force velocity
Wow,
profile. Yeah.
that's cool.
Does it split the movements, lower body, upper body, or does it just give you like a general guidelines?
By the way, none of us are endorsed by this app.
Yeah, no.
So.
No, and there's a couple other. There's a powerlifting app that I just played around with at the end of the semester that we only used it one day, so I gotta figure that one out a little bit more too. But you might be interested in that one.
Definitely interested in
Yeah,
that one.
maybe we'll test you out for that too, because you had to go through multiple lifts, deadlift, bench, squat, you know, and figure out where your deficits were.
Yeah, I can tell you it's in bench.
I'm right there with you. I know my weakness. Yeah. So.
But yeah, so when they gave you that, did it give you a list of exercises?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And did it split between lower upper body?
Yeah, and it's all together kind of in one program, and then it'll tell you. I think it's like 80. Most of them are all you're lifting at 85% if you have the force deficit.
Okay.
Or not. So, yeah, it's pretty cool. So yeah, if there's a coach that doesn't have any knowledge now, can they go and coach the athlete in the weight room on that stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not. Probably not.
Okay.
You know, if they don't have that knowledge, but again, they can at least give suggestions to the athlete, and then the athlete can go seek someone out to help them. So
Interesting.
Is there the app? Do you think that the app is like user friendly, or is there like a steep learning curve? Like, do you have to have a prior understanding of the force velocity curve in order to use it, or can like somebody who's just starting out who wants to apply those principles pick up the app and say, okay, I'll use this app and here's what I'll do for my athletes?
I think it's pretty user friendly. Whether or not they understand the information might be another thing.
So do you think
Right.
you need some kind of like minimal understanding of why why you want to apply this type of
I
training
think
for your
so.
athletes?
And
Okay.
if you're working with athletes, you should have
Yeah.
that minimal knowledge anyways.
Yeah. Okay.
So, which we're working on as a field to try and better that, right? And get better strength coaches out there and who are certified and everything. Hopefully more regulations in the field and stuff like that.
I think it would be so great, especially, since there's not really a lot of stuff available for, in college and collegiate level athletes, you have, the weight rooms and you have the strength coaches that the colleges actually paid. But
Right.
let's say you're somebody like a strength coach in high school, and you don't really have the budget for it. But you have the knowledge, right? Because that's what you went to school for. You have the knowledge for it. Then here's a $10 app that I could use with my athletes, and
Absolutely.
lets you work with minimal and cheap way to kind of improve your athlete's performance without having to.
Yeah, it gives them some affordable tools, definitely.
Yeah.
Because especially if you don't have a budget for that. Usually, you're right, at the collegiate level you do, but we're trying to get a budget just for strength coaches at the high school level, which is great.
Because I know a lot of, maybe it's not anymore today, because the science is just, it's a lot more available for people, so people are a lot more knowledgeable. But I know back then, when I started school, a lot of the kind of complaints that I would hear from strength coaches at the collegiate level is that they're getting so many athletes all at once, and they're getting athletes who have like no experience in the weight room.
Correct.
And you have you're working with 100 people at once, and you can't keep an eye on everybody.
That's why we need high school coaches too, right?
Yeah.
High school strength coaches, so they're a little more experienced. Because again, they're coming in here and they're getting a lot. Think about football, they're getting hit a lot harder.
Yes.
Yeah.
A lot of things going on, so their body has to be prepared for that. So,
Yeah.
from an injury prevention standpoint, it'd be better if we had, those positions in high school. So.
Yeah.
But also just having assistants at the collegiate level.
Yeah.
Because they do have a lot of athletes to deal with. That's something that not everybody understands. That wow, they are training 100 people and they got to organize all the sports into one weight room.
Jeez.
Yeah. Whoever's in season.
And of course, the school wants you to focus on them playing and not really them spending all this time in a weight room. So it's like you consolidate your efforts.
Yeah.
And
You gotta
cut your losses where you can.
Work well with coaches, and,
Yeah.
again, give them a little bit of education behind what you're doing, and if you get with a good coaching staff that trusts you.
Do you
in what
find
you're
that
doing,
coaches that you work with are a lot more receptive to your information? Because I know it didn't used to always be like that, right?
Correct. Yeah, we kind of talked about that last time. And I didn't until they're like, oh wow, you actually know what you're doing, and they've seen me kind of prove and have proven results with the athletes that I've worked with, that the trust kind of came along with that. And now that's kind of like, oh, you know what, you're going to have a little bit more free reign with what you're doing, because I know what you're doing is beneficial for our athletes, and now I want you working with more of the teams and things like that. So
With are they collegiate or high school rugby players? I couldn't remember.
Both.
Both.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay, I didn't know you were working with both.
Yeah.
Is it male and female?
Male.
Male. Okay.
Mhm.
Would the
At the high school level, there are a couple females.
okay? Is it
primarily males?
Is it like a co-ed team?
It's an academy.
Oh.
Only.
Okay. Interesting.
Mhm.
Would your approach change at all between a male and a female athlete in rugby respect?
In what, the training that they do?
Yeah.
Not necessarily. I think maybe the approach to training them is a little bit different. And how you, like, for the most part, I feel like when I'm training females, they ask a lot more questions than when I'm training the males, they're just like, okay, go do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I was gonna ask, like, have you found any gender differences between like how external and internal cues affect male and female athletes?
You know what? There's not a lot of research on female athletes in attentional focus, so there is a need for that. I mean, in general strength conditioning, there's not a lot of research on females either. And so I was reading this big review about that. One of the things was, okay, they say menstrual cycles can affect, how you gain strength or how you gain hypertrophy or what's going on in that aspect. So they'd have to kind of track that in addition to the results, and it's just a lot easier just to train males for studies. So that's generally why they're chosen.
Oh, because there's you don't have to deal with stuff like the menstrual cycle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think definitely now
Mm-hmm.
you should definitely focus a lot more on a female athlete, because I mean, just barbell sports in general for female athletes.
I would say
Like,
there's probably a lot more females training now.
compared
Yeah.
to like even a few years ago.
Right.
With the advent of CrossFit and how
Mhm.
that's affected powerlifting and weightlifting, I think CrossFit has definitely increased the popularity of both powerlifting and weightlifting, and have brought more women into the weight room. So I think studies focusing on the effects of all the stuff that we used to know that were just applied strictly to the male population, have now you got to bring it back now, and we got to do all these studies over again and see if it's affecting the female population
Absolutely.
the same exact way.
You guys ready to do some research?
Yes.
Yeah, there's endless
It's the most fun
possibilities
academia
and stuff.
is going back and kind of asking a question and finding out if you can find the answer.
Yeah, it's exciting when you find some answers,
Yeah.
and then but however it takes you down a rabbit hole sometimes, and
Right.
then you need
And
more
you
answers.
You
and
realize
more
that
answers
this
and-
rabbit hole is really further.
Yeah.
It's a lot deeper than I was expecting to go into.
Mhm. How it goes.
Absolutely. So.
Yeah. Now I want to drink from the fountain of youth and just like
Yeah.
I go as deep
Get
into
all
that
these
rabbit hole.
degrees and all these studies.
Yeah, as
Well,
much as I can.
and one of the things you were mentioning too about there's a lot more research out there for people that aren't really in the field, but one of the problems with that too is they'll read one article and they'll just go with it and say, oh, this is the way to do things.
They kind of use it like as an umbrella thing,
Yeah.
right? Where this one study says this,
Mhm.
so I'm gonna apply it now to all my clients.
Yeah. Well, and there's we go over in one of my advanced classes. It's like a MythBusters day, and I'll give them one article.
Every class needs one of those.
Yeah.
We need those.
Well, we'll talk about, we'll bring up one topic, and then they'll go and they'll do the research, and they're like, oh wait, this article says this, well this one says this, and this one says this, and then it's like, well, what's the answer? I don't know. Nobody knows, but there was this one article, and they picked out that there was that, 0.5%
Here's the
increase
answer
in
I wanted to-
quadricep growth, and so
Yeah.
now that's the best exercise to do for your quads.
Yeah.
And it's
Here's the
like,
answer
no.
that I wanted to find, so that's
Is
what
that
I
is that a
Yes.
little more feasible to look at for like a meta-analysis, since it pools all these different things together?
Yeah, it looks at the data as well, right? The meta-analysis. So that's generally what you want to look at, as a higher level of research anyways.
Yeah, because
So-
I've seen on different things, like they usually make a hierarchy of evidence in terms of like what's the most valid, and usually meta-analysis is at the top.
Meta-analysis and lit review, right? Because they're compiling information from multiple studies
Gotcha.
and saying,
So now,
hey, this
not
is what
only
we
do you
can
have
say.
the like basically you pool all the participants together,
Right.
and then you also have the inclusion exclusion
Exclusion.
criteria,
Yep.
where it's like, all right, if I want to find if something works, here are the things that I know has to be included, and here's the things that can't be included. So
Right.
include some, take some out,
Mhm.
so you know that there's as very few like confounding variables as possible.
Yeah, we can highly trust the results of this because we compiled all this information. So
You brought up this point a little while ago when we were talking that you were trying to figure out like which of these pieces of like research should I apply to my athletes. How do you kind of screen that? Like, which things should you use based on research, and what things should you use just based on practical experience that you've had?
Well, you have to find.
So, there's that kind of delicate balance.
Yeah, you definitely have to find a balance between it, because an evidence-based practitioner is going to take their practical experience in addition to what's being done in research and kind of meld the two. Sometimes things in research, like you were mentioning, I could read a study, but it was male athletes and I'm training females.
Yeah.
So can I take that and say, okay, I'm going to trial it out and see if it does work with females or not? Or maybe I'm saying, well, the way they're doing it isn't going to work with my team, and so I'm not going to implement it, But a lot of trial and error as well. And if something comes out that's new, I say always be skeptical at first until there's a little bit more information, or slowly incorporate a little bit of it into your training methods and see if you personally, in a practical sense, find an effect. And if you don't, then maybe that's not the best fit for your team or your athletes. But it's definitely a balance between the two. I'd say don't just come up with your own crazy ideas. There should be some evidence behind the reasoning as to why you're doing things. But
yeah, because I'm starting to see, and maybe this is just my confounded Instagram feed, but I'm starting to see like the extreme starting to take place. It's either practical experience or evidence-based 100%. And so I think people need to learn that there definitely is a balance, and I would say coaching is almost more of an art than it is a science.
Well, and that's one of the reasons why I still have a practical side, right? So I don't want to be all on the academic side. Yes, I love I love studying and researching all of these things, but if I never get to apply it, then how do I know if it really works in a practical setting?
Yeah. It's the same thing where you talk about you could learn, you could have all the book smarts,
right?
But if you never kind of put all of those skills out to use in the real world,
right?
Then how do you know if what you learn actually works?
Well, I think it makes me a better coach too, because then I could say, hey, this is the way to actually implement this research, okay? Because I've trialed it.
Yes.
But also just being a practitioner, there's a lot of ideas that come from being a practitioner. Like, oh, okay, how could we do this better? Oh, or, how can I get these people stronger faster, right? Because in rugby, I got to do, I got this short amount of time, they have 2 seasons, and so what do I do? Oh, well, maybe I should go study, attentional focus and see if I can get them stronger faster by just having an external focus or whatever it is. And so a lot of the academic side comes from the practical side as well. So it's a good balance, and again, that's why I don't necessarily ever want to let go of one side or the other.
So would you say that doing research, because I've always heard, and I think this comes from the really good researchers, where they say, all right, the results that we found, it's applied to the means, right, of a mean of the population. Right. But what you have to do is you have to take the results from this research and now individualize it for your clients.
Yeah, that's why, that's where you have to, again, trial it out a little bit and say, okay, how can I implement this and get it to best work with this person? So it's not always like, oh, I can do exactly what they did in the study. It might have to change it a little bit,
Yeah, typically, from what I've heard from his point, really popular researchers, is that you don't want to apply the exact same protocol because of research limitations and everything. You can't do the exact optimal program anyway. And so it does take a lot of trial and error.
Yeah, it might take a little bit of the specificity away from the athlete that you're working with too, if it's like, oh, I have to do it just this way. So
how often do you find that when you see a training protocol or something that you want to test out and it doesn't work?
Wouldn't say that I've seen it just not work, but I have found some things that I feel have worked better than others.
Things that kind of fell short?
Yeah, with training rugby at one point, I was thinking about just the sport of rugby, and I'm like, okay, they do a high force or strength act, and then it's followed by something powerful, right? Because let's say they're rucking or mauling or whatever it is, and then all of a sudden they're sprinting after somebody, so I'm thinking about, okay, well, what, when I'm in their preseason period, how can I start to get more specific to their sport? And so one summer I trialed out just French contrast training, right, or complex training in the in their program, and then went on to circuits and things like that. But during that period of time, you know, I had some of the athletes come and tell me how they felt like this was more like rugby training to them. And so whether or not it was a true effect of that type of training or it was a psychological effect that they were getting from the training, making them feel like they were better athletes, either way I was seeing, you know, we were seeing some improvements. So, and that was just basically like, oh, me sitting here and thinking about, okay, what is this sport? And, you know, traditionally during that time I'd just be training them for power, right, as we're peaking.
Yeah.
But I decided to throw something different in during that time and found that it worked better than what we were doing before. Again, I'd have to study and see if it was psychological.
What is French contrast training?
So it's where they perform like a heavy lift and then followed up by something explosive afterwards.
Okay,
so they did, you know, squat. They did 5 repetitions at 85%, and then they did 5 squat jumps immediately following.
Okay.
So they would perform a lift and then something that mimicked the same, you know, motor pattern or
yes.
you know, and muscle groups that were utilized in the lift.
Okay, yeah, I have heard of that. I've heard of contrast training. I just you said French contrast training because I've heard there's complex training, it's potentiation.
Yes, complex training. That's not. Yeah, exactly.
Like, what are the French doing that we aren't doing?
Besides, like, how are they eating so much fat and drinking so much wine? And It seems like they're doing something better with their athletes too.
Right. Well, and you know, I got some really good advice from a friend in Jeffries a long time ago when I was talking to him about training rugby specifically. I'm like, gosh, you know, there's all these different methods, and should I do this with them? Should I do that with them? And he's like, don't overcomplicate it. You know, stick to the basics, and you know they're going to get results because that's what's, you know, shown to, you know, be beneficial through research for them to enhance their strength and their power. Don't try and get too fancy with your training. You know, which early on you learn that if you go into the field of personal training and you're trying to do these fancy exercises and things like that. Don't do it.
I think people take the word variety to like really really far levels. Like you want some variety.
Right.
You don't want too much variety where you're not getting an adaptation.
Right.
Because that's what
if
you want.
you're doing all these other chest exercises instead of bench, are you going to increase your bench press? Because I know that dumbbells does not transfer for me to bench press. Some people it might, but it does not for me. So,
Do you want to share your totals?
My totals.
Your powerlifting totals?
No. I don't want to embarrass myself right now. No.
Well, you never know.
I'm sure there'll be someone listening. That's
I feel like girls think that their totals don't measure up to like good powerlifting standards. But man, I like even in our ASU powerlifting team, some of these girls can compete at a very high level. And they don't think they're lifting very much, so you might.
The only one that I've maxed on like recently was squat, and it was like 245. But I haven't done like my deadlift or bench max in a while. Yeah. So.
Which one out of those 3 is your favorite?
Well, so squat has always been my favorite, and I guess maybe just you're in the squat position all the time playing volleyball, you know, and and so I was always really good at squatting. However, about 2 years ago, I was having some upper back issues, and I couldn't squat for probably like 9 months. Do a back squat. Oh yes, trust me, it was totally detrimental to my psyche and everything. But so I started to fall in love with deadlift and all the variations that, you know, came along with deadlifting. And so it's probably still, I mean, I primarily was doing more deadlifts, but now as I'm had slowly gotten back into squatting, and I enjoy watching my weight go up, as far, not my weight, but you know what I mean.
Yes, the bar weight.
I don't want to watch that weight go up, but yes, my bar weight go up. You know, squat's my favorite, then deadlift, then bench press is just.
At least you're not one of those people. I was having this conversation with somebody in the gym the other day. It's like, at least your least favorite lift is not your best lift, because that would totally suck.
Yeah.
Like your best lift is the lift that you don't like to come into the gym and train.
Yeah.
That would be the worst.
And I do like doing like dumbbell chest press better than bench press, but I think it was last semester or semester before, I was working on, okay, I need to get my bench press strength up because I'm like so weak if I don't train it for a while, or you know, it's just slow to progress no matter what, you know, tactic I try and implement. But so our lab coordinator would come in and he's like, And I'm like,
Oh.
I don't even want to lift in front of you, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm like,
That's
I
fantastic.
only have,
Thank
like,
you for the vote of confidence.
yeah, right? So I'm like, yeah, like 95 pounds, here we go, you know? Trying to get it back up, but yeah, but then I'd go grab dumbbells and I'm like, oh, I got 45s, here we
Do
go,
you,
you know?
do you incorporate like the contrast training in your own routines?
I did it actually with the rugby athletes throughout that time. Because whenever I created the program, I'm like, well, I want to see what that feels like for me. So I'll do that sometimes before I give them a program. So I just wrote like the summer program for the high school Americans through USA Rugby, and I was like, okay, well, I just want to see what this feels like to make sure, that what I'm actually giving them is going to be good work. I mean, obviously it kicked my butt, but you never really know until you put somebody through it to kind of gauge. I can guess, obviously, at this point that it would be a good program, but I always just like to know how I feel from it, you know. There was one of the circuits that I was pretty dead by the end of it, but it's good for those boys.
So you said that you used the contrast training because they felt like they were more athletic while they were doing it? Was that just strictly why you incorporated it?
Well, and no, that's not strictly why I incorporated it. I did it because I felt like it mimicked their play a little bit more. Okay. Right? So again, like they went from that strength act to a high force act in sport anyways. And so that's why I decided to choose that. And then I felt more like an athlete when I was training that way too. I'm like, ooh, I feel like, maybe I should have trained this way in volleyball or, whatnot. But
That's
so
sometimes,
enjoyable.
That's sometimes the downside to powerlifting is that you don't really feel like an athlete.
Yeah.
No, you don't.
It's really hard to feel like an athlete when you're slow and sluggish. And it takes you an hour to get through one movement.
I agree.
Yes.
So it's summer, so I've just kind of switched to doing more metabolic conditioning, but then I watch my weight start to go down, and then I get like, I can tell when I'm losing some strength from not doing it. It's a little
you're not supposed to be
depressing.
chasing all these rabbits, but you want to chase every single rabbit. Like, I want to be jacked and tan, but I also want to be strong. Yeah. And I also want to be an athlete.
I'm like, and then I get in my strength zones, and I'm training that way, more powerlifting, and then I'm like, oh my god, I try to run a mile, and it's, difficult, and I'm like,
oh god, why would you do that?
I don't know, right? It's
I'm
horrible,
scared to run a mile right now, just because I don't want to know what the time is.
Yeah. But again, then you feel super unathletic, so... I tried to jump a fence. I mean, it sounds really weird. I tried to jump a fence yesterday, and it didn't go so well. I'm like, I should probably start training like
that's normal.
Again.
No, it's totally normal.
No, my parents were out of town.
I'm like, I wonder if I could jump that bench. Probably not.
If I could jump.
I had to do their irrigation, right? So I have to jump. I have to open one thing there, jump the fence to, shut this other thing. And so my dad had put a ladder up, so I jumped down, and then I'm like, oh wait, how do I get back up there? So I tried and failed miserably right on Gilbert Road, but...
Now you gotta do some parkour so you can learn how to jump over walls.
No, I actually wanted to do that at one time.
Okay, at
KTR in Mesa and
I went there when I was a kid.
You did?
First for skateboarding, when I was really younger, and then once I started getting into like training and stuff, and honestly I started with like parkour, I went for like the gyms and stuff that they had. Right. And so, I love KTR. If you're in the local valley, KTR is the place to be.
I didn't want to be the only... I saw all the little kids doing it, though. I'm like, I don't want to be the old lady over there. Like, trying to jump off mats and everything. Yeah. But I would totally do parkour if I didn't tear my ACL or something.
No, I did it in high school, and it was actually a lot of fun. Yeah, I bet it would. Okay, before we keep going on, I want to respect your time.
Yes.
Where can people find you, say hi, ask training questions if you don't mind?
Yeah, I mean, you can search Rachel Larson on Instagram or on Facebook. It's Rachel Larson and then PhD C, CSCS. So that's kind of like my professional page as well. Or you can always email me, rachel.larson11@asu.edu. Well.
And can they go to you, like, let's say, hey, I think your area of study is really interesting. Can I be like a participant? Maybe I can.
Absolutely.
Like, bring them all to me.
Always need participants. So, that'd be great if you're interested. Also, I allow shadowing. So I had one student go with me to USA Rugby camp this past winter.
Oh, cool.
And so, it was like, wow, that was an awesome experience, I wish I could have done that when I was in college.
Right?
So, and I had him help me out with testing, and then I even let him do an agility session with the boys. Okay. So, it was really cool. So, always willing to talk shop. So,
Sweet. So final question.
Yes.
And I asked this with Samin. I like the answer that she got. So I'm
Oh, I
gonna start
remember this.
doing
Yes,
Um,
this. Yeah.
What is one thing that you want everybody to know about your field?
About my field.
Yes.
Or not necessarily you feel like maybe one thing that you've studied that you think everybody could benefit from when if they incorporate it into their routine.
I would, well, let's see. I don't know about incorporate into their routine, but just from like a coaching standpoint,
Yes.
know that what you're actually saying to an athlete does matter and is having an effect. And so be willing to study some coaching science as well, because it will make you a better practitioner just from the verbal feedback that you're giving, or whether you're saying something positive or negative, or again giving them an internal or external cue. All those things are affecting what's going on with the athlete, not just in their mental state, but also physiologically you're affecting things. Okay, so what we say does matter. If you're having someone perform a motor skill, for optimal performance, give an external cue, and again, if you want to increase hypertrophy, give an internal cue.
I know I said that was my last question, but this is my last question.
Okay.
You said look at some coaching science.
Yeah.
What are some like good places to start for that? Like even like keywords on PubMed or
like reading, or maybe
like
people
that.
to follow, or good coaches you try to emulate.
Yeah, so look up feedback, verbal instruction, research. Those are kind of some of the big keywords. I mean, you can just look up coaching science. I know Brett Bartholomew has a conscious coaching book out. Also, Nick Winkleman is another one that's big to follow in the coaching science world as well. Again, taking a multi-practice approach to their coaching. So, Gabrielle Wolf has something out on she has the optimal learning theory as well, where she implements verbal instruction, the perception of choice, and all that type of stuff as well. Yeah, which we didn't get into this time, but that's okay. That's another topic we can talk about. So.
Well, let's have you come in before I leave.
Yeah.
Again. Rachel Larson, thank you so much for being back and letting us interview you a second time.
Absolutely.
This is good. I feel like we didn't cover the exact same stuff that we did last time.
Yeah.
We covered some new stuff.
We covered what I wanted to cover for the audience, but then we got into some good stuff.
Yeah.
So awesome.
Yeah,
thank you so
guys.
much. Guys, thank you so much for watching again. Like, subscribe, share this, do whatever you do.
And everybody, even the ones that don't like to lift.
Even the ones that don't like to lift, learn to lift from us, with us. The podcast now is all over the place. I put it up on Anchor now, so really wherever you listen to podcasts, it should be on there. So go check it out. And check out the blog as well.
And give us a 5-star review on iTunes and all of those other social media platforms.
Yes, take time out of your day to go to every single platform and give us 5 stars. Check out the blog at agoratan.com, AGORATEN.com. We'll see you guys next time.